in anyway, and we're just talking to you on behalf of bettingsites.co.uk. We've just got a few questions about the new directives that the Premier League have brought in and the way they're going to be implemented. Obviously, the season is just around the corner. We saw the Community Shield yesterday. I think in the first half, there were 3 bookings, which is the first time that's ever happened in a Community Shield. 2 of them were for kicking the ball away, but rather than booting the ball sort of into row's edge, they were just for literally sort of tapping the ball away and preventing the restart. Are you in favour of this new implementation of the rule?
Yeah, I think the Community Shield always sets the scene, or should set the scene, for the season ahead. And yes, this was a point in case where Stuart Atwell, the referee, clearly understands the new guidelines. The guidelines really for sort of having a caution in that instance is mainly around time wasting, which we'll no doubt talk about later in this interview, but also the respect for the game. And what we saw yesterday were 2 players, I'd use the word petulant rather than anything else, just knocking the ball away, delaying that restart, and thus time wasting basically. So Stuart took the new initiative to the nth degree and said, no, enough's enough. And I can remember going back, way back in 2008, I refereed the Charity Shield, and we had a similar thing for respect towards match officials. And Helderson played for Portsmouth, and he remonstrated with my assistant, not overtly, but he remonstrated, and it was that image that was being portrayed around the world, and he received a caution. So it's nothing new to see the season being set off with quite strict adherence to any new policies.
Often it seems that these new policies are kind of implemented fairly strictly for the first couple of weeks, but then it seems to tail off. Do you think that will be the case this season, or do you think there'll be more sort of, it'll try harder to keep them going throughout the duration of the season?
Yeah, I was speaking to members of the PGMOL who actually implement these new initiatives and laws only this week. Mm-hmm. And the word consistency kept cropping up in that conversation. And what the management team are looking at are having a consistent application. So if you ask me this question again in December, I'd like to give you the sort of same answer, really, but time will tell. But clearly, what we'd like to see are less occasions this is happening, because players and managers probably amend their style and their approach, and the message will begin to seep through the system. So I'd like to see a sort of downward trajectory, but time will tell.
Yeah, hopefully they do take it on board. It would be good to see. Mikel Arteta is someone who's obviously very animated on the touchline often. He was cautioned by Stuart Atwell in the first half. Do you think that was justified in your view? Did you see that incident?
Yeah, well look, once again, what we're seeing is a new implementation of the laws and regulations. This one really is more aimed, I think, at the nature of the game and the spectacle of the game. What we've got to realise, of course, is that the professional game owe a duty of care to our brothers and sisters in the grassroots level. So what you see on a Saturday afternoon or a Saturday evening on your TV screen, you'll see replicated on a Sunday morning in the local parks. And one of which is the technical behaviour of the managers in their technical area. And we've seen a number of occasions last year, quite high-profile cases of managers getting themselves into trouble for remonstrating too much. But unfortunately, that sort of replicates itself down the pyramid. And so in order to make sure the grassroots people realise that this type of behaviour is not acceptable, even at the professional level, you will see managers this season, I'm sure, getting themselves into trouble like Mikel did yesterday if they overstep the mark. And I think that's a good policy.
Yeah, I think you're right. It shows that the respect needs to be there at all levels of the game, and otherwise,
indeed.
And they'll see Mikel Arteta sent to the stands in the pub football, you'd be getting sent to the car park or back to the pub for a pint, wouldn't you? I suppose.
Well, yeah. That's right. Well, hopefully it doesn't get to that far. And managers, as Arteta said, actually, post-match, he realises the new regulations. He'll have to amend his style of reaction and his frustration shown on the sidelines. He's aware of that also. So I'd like to say that, this is a good implementation of a already existing regulation, but we'll see how things go.
Another new implementation that we noticed yesterday, I think it's new, is that players that go off the pitch for treatment need to stay off the pitch for 30 seconds before they can be reintroduced to the game. Is that new, or is that just a kind of tweak of a law that was already in place?
That's pretty well, not necessarily new. It is a tweak. If players cannot receive treatment on the field of play, other than a potential head injury or indeed a serious injury such as a broken leg or something.
Yeah.
So if they have an impact knock where it's an ouch for sort of 5 seconds and then the magic sponge comes on and up they get, that's fine. But if they need treatment, then they need to go off the field. And what referees are being told, look, if the guy is serious enough to go down and stay on the ground for some time, then possibly a duty of care to that player is to say, look, just stay off. I know you want to come back on, but just stay off. There's a double-edged sword there, of course, because it's player welfare, but it's also showing that player that if you do, dare I say, feign injury or exaggerate the nature of that injury, then you will be out of that game for a period of time. And it's quite frustrating for the player himself and, of course, the management team. But ultimately, again, it's designed about the dark arts and making sure that players who are, injured and properly injured, as they say, receive treatment, but also receive that time to recover. Yeah,
I think it's a good thing, and hopefully it does at least give players a second thought with regard to going down if you're not really injured, because off the pitch for 30 seconds you might consider.
That's right. I mean, the first few questions there are all sort of designed around the image of the game, of course, and that's something the authorities are acutely aware of. That FIFA sort of deem this the beautiful game, and they want to make sure that that's what the aspects that you and I see on the TV and indeed at the ground itself. So it may well be that everybody says, "Oh, it always happens this way," but there is a degree of change happening in the world of football, and one is, the image that's being portrayed, and this is just part of it.
Agreed. In the Championship this weekend, there was an average of over 5 cards per game. Do you think this is beneficial to the league in general, or is it going to be more, frustrating for fans? Stop-start nature and cautions left, right, and centre.
Look, it depends on the players' behaviour, really. We already mentioned the consistency nature of the referees, the officials, and I'd like to think that we don't see this. Let's go from today, boys, but let's forget about it. Tomorrow. So I'd like to think that the consistency will be there in the match officials, but it's the players and the players' reaction and their behaviour. And if we'll see a change over a period of time in players' behaviour, then you'll see less cards. I mean, if you look at I don't have the stats in front of me, but if you look at the reasons for those cards, I can bet you that 3 of the 5 are down to technical issues rather than putting an opponent in rosette with a robust challenge. Yeah. So if we can get rid of these technical cautions, you'll see those cautions come down rapidly.
I agreed. I think obviously another directive that's new, it's kind of brought from the World Cup, is the increased amount of added on time. Arsenal scored in the 111th minute yesterday. Are you in favour of these longer amounts of injury time being added on? Do you think it's frustrating for managers, or do you think it's just for the benefit of the game?
Well, I'm glad it wasn't brought in when I was refereeing, because I'd be blowing out my backside by the time the 95th minute came up. So, I mean, in my day, it was either 2 minutes or 4 minutes, depending on how fit I felt. So, but it's good for the game. I was at the Northampton Town's game against Stevenage on Saturday, and we had a total of 22 minutes of added time. And by the time I got home, my steak wasn't medium; it was well done. So, these things happen. But on a more serious note, FIFA decreed in the World Cup in Qatar that the ball was only in play for sort of 54 minutes or so in each 90 minutes. Well, if you've paid $100 to go and see a game, and you've taken your child with you and everything else, you want to see the game. You don't want to see the ball in the stands all the time or the game dead. And so again, FIFA said, look, what image do we want to portray here? How can we have the ball in play more often? So what Kalina said, who's the head of refereeing in FIFA, he said, look, every stoppage must be accountable for. Now, if you take that to the nth degree, yeah, you're going to get a quite a lengthy game. So it is a bit of a jump start, really. It is a bit of a surprise to everybody. But when you consider that, in a normal game last year in the Premier League, it was 54 minutes out of every 90. Well, what's happened to the rest of the 36 minutes that's left? Yeah. So you will see these larger times added on again until players and managers temper their enthusiasm for delaying the game. And the referees have been told to make sure that they play the allotted time. Of course, the outside effect of all this is, if you're a broadcaster or a radio program, or indeed the security, you're making sure that the trains are ready to take the supporters away from the stadium at a certain time, and suddenly that certain time is being eaten into. So there's all sorts of ramifications about this, but ultimately it has to be good for the game, but not necessarily good for my steak when I get home, which is well done.
Everyone's timekeeping. Yeah, I think you're right. It's good for the game in general. In the Women's World Cup, we've seen VAR announce their decisions over the tannoy to the crowds. In the Premier League, I don't think that's going to be implemented yet. But is it something you'd like to see brought into the game to kind of at least link up the VAR to the crowd that are watching? Because otherwise, they don't really know exactly what's going on, do they? Often.
No, I mean your question there is actually posed that whole question itself in terms of we must make sure that whatever happened on the field, the crowd feel as if they're part of it, because ultimately they pay everybody's wages. So and FIFA and IFAB being the lawmakers at arms of FIFA, they've recognised this as well. And with the introduction of VAR, VAR is sort of in its infancy still. It's only sort of 5-6 years in its making. And we are learning all the time about how to use VAR. And part of that is to encourage the fans and the people watching the game to feel part of that decision-making process. And we're reaching sort of section 2 now. We've introduced VAR, we know what it's about, and now people want to feel part of it. And as part of that, FIFA and IFAB have said, well, why don't we broadcast the decision from the referee after they've looked at the screen to the rest of the audience? And it's in its infancy. It's not perfect, absolutely right, because I think we need more detail as to why they've come to the decision, not just saying what the decision is. And that will be the next stage. But I think it's the right move. I think people need to be felt as if part of that process. And the Premier League will be looking at it quite closely, because again, they want to make sure that their supporters feel part of that decision-making process. I think it's good for the game, and it will get better.
Yeah, I think it would be an improvement. Switching tack slightly to obviously we got used to seeing yourself on BT Sports last season and previous seasons in terms of analysing referees' decisions. BT have rebranded to TNT this season, and unfortunately we're not going to be seeing you, but Sky Sports have kind of jumped on the front foot and brought in a refereeing expert to analyse decisions. Do you think this is a mistake by TNT? They've missed the trick, and Sky Sports have quickly jumped in there and going to kind of steal the show. Is that their plan?
Well, I'm bound to say it's a mistake because I've done me out of a job. So
probably got.
I do think it's a mistake, actually. Take personalities out of it, because like it or not, match officials are part of that entertainment package that we now see, and that fans are getting used to. And fans, I think the majority welcome it, because it gives the so-called rules or laws expert their view. Again, they may not agree with it, but that's the rule or the law. And so by doing away with that position, I think TNT have missed a bit of a charge there. And certainly Sky, whilst they didn't want to be seen to be following a competitor's initiative, as soon as it was known that TNT were not going to have a refereeing expert, they soon said, well, we're going to have one, because we can see the value in it. And and as you quite rightly say, they've got Mike Dean now doing the Saturday special. That'll be interesting to see, won't it?
It will be. It will be. I mean, he was quite a divisive figure among fans as a referee. Do you think that's part of the decision as to why they picked him specifically, because he was sort of loved and hated in equal measure?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know the reasons why they picked him, but my sort of thoughts behind that is that Mike is fresh off the field. He's a known face within the game itself. You use that word divisive. Well, he can be, but most referees are divisive, depending if you're wearing a blue shirt or a red shirt. So I think it's good that he's on that panel. I think it's good that he gives refereeing a voice. He has to be careful, of course, because broadcasters want entertainment as well. So he's got a great sense of humour. So I look forward to seeing that. But ultimately, the law is the law, and provided he lays down what the law is, then other people can then debate whether or not that's right or wrong. And that's the real important thing, to make sure that people know what the law is. And yeah, good for Sky Sports, and I'll be watching keenly.
You'll be watching Sky Sports, not TNT. I think yeah, wait and see. But
you mentioned that, but of course, that's part of it, because if they've got a product that another broadcaster hasn't got, then good for them,
Yeah.
So and we'll see when the viewing stats come out.
Exactly. I think TNT are hoping to broadcast live conversations between VAR officials and Stockley Park overseers, the VAR over there. Do you think that's realistic? Do you think the Premier League will allow that to happen?
Well, actually, the decision is with FIFA and not the Premier League.
Oh, okay.
And at the moment, FIFA, who govern world football, of course, haven't given dispensation for that to happen. So as we sit here today, it won't happen. But I think that over a period of time, we'll go back to that previous question about the announcement of the decision by the match official. I think over a period of time, people will want to start peeling away that layer just to see how things happen. We can share the conversation post-match. So when you're analysing the game post-match, we could see the decision-making and the process between the VAR and the referee being shown. But during the match, it's a no-no at the moment from FIFA. And I don't think that will change in the foreseeable future. We have to think of around the world. And whilst we are pretty progressive in this country, there are other federations who are not so progressive. And FIFA have to look after everybody, not just the English game. So we'll wait and see. But I do think that something of that nature will happen ultimately, but not just at the moment.
I think one match official reportedly claimed that now it will be a rarity to see games not go over 100 minutes added on time. So more of a hypothetical question. Do we risk alienating the newer generation, the TikTok generation, if you like, who have kind of shorter attention spans? Are they going to want to sit down and watch a football match that's going to last over 100 minutes? Or are they going to lose interest and go and watch something else instead?
Yeah, again, time will tell. But if you're a fan of a club, it doesn't matter if you're a new generation or an old generation. You want to watch your team. If you want to have a TikTok sort of generation, they may be looking at clips of the game rather than the whole game, even now. So if the game lasts 110 minutes or 90 minutes, I think the TikTok generation will still see what they want to see. When it comes to span of attention and things, look, if Northampton Town are winning 1-0 and I'm sat there in the stands watching them and the referee puts up 10 minutes, I'll be absolutely barking mad at him. But if Northampton Town are losing 1-0, he puts up 10 minutes, I'm so happy. It's unbelievable. Like any fan, it depends on how that team are doing at that stage. I just think ultimately, it'll add to the excitement of the game, as indeed VAR has added to the excitement of the game without people realising it. It's almost a sublime thing that's happening in the background. And we'll soon get used to it. But as I said at the start, if players temper their enthusiasm for delaying the game, we won't see 10 minutes. We'll be back to the 2, 3, 4 minutes for injuries, etc. But we've got so much more going on in the game nowadays that I think we should be getting used to having these lengthier stoppages at the end of the game.
We've seen kind of doing a refereeing tour of of Europe or the world, if you like. Mark Clattenburg was very respected when he was in the Premier League, but now I think he was in Egypt recently, but I think I'm not sure exactly what he's doing there, but do you think you could see him back in the Premier League? He was highly respected when he refereed here previously, or has he burnt his bridges?
No, I don't think he burnt his bridges, and you're quite right. Klatz was an extremely good, talented referee. He was what I class as a natural referee, not a man-made referee. Okay. And the players and the managers respected that, and his high-profile games proved that he was the top of his tree. So Mark was a very good referee. I think, although I haven't spoken to Mark for some time now, I think his career is now taking other avenues. I think we'll see him on TV soon enough in Gladiators.
Oh, so, really?
Yeah, I think he's doing a Gladiators show. So we'll see Klatz, on our screen soon. But in terms of refereeing, no, I think it's his decision. He's decided that he wants to move on. It's a loss to the Premier League for sure, because he was a good referee. But as I said earlier, I think we're in a stage now where we're beginning to sort of catch up in our experience and our expertise in refereeing. And Klatz will be missed, but he'll be fit. The hole he leaves will be filled.
On another topic, I noticed you don't have any Twitter or Instagram account, or not that I could see, and not an official one. Is that due to referees traditionally facing online abuse? And did you face more abuse when you worked for BT Sport or when you actually refereed? And do you think also in a wider spectrum, is the problem getting worse, or are we actually going some way to actually helping referees not be?
Yeah, I think good point. Look, I mean, I don't have a Twitter account. I don't have an Instagram account. If my daughter had her way, I'd have every media account going, but I don't. And I don't, just because it's sort of bypassed me. I never did have one, and I never will have one. But in terms of online abuse, there are plenty of people around me who do have those social media apps, and they do inform me of how things are. Mm-hmm. And for sure, when I was refereeing and I'd make an error, then I'd be given operational advice by many a supporter of that particular team. But what I found was, when I was working for BT Sports, that I was getting operational advice from all sorts of people, and not necessarily advice. But so yeah, I think I got more dare I say, abuse in my latter years as a broadcaster rather than an active referee. Really? But that's the nature of the beast, of course. Nobody ever really put, and Pete Walton was a very good referee. Nobody ever put that. And if I didn't appear, then I'd take that as a real plus. So, but we'll see. I'm sure this particular podcast today will get some traction, and there'll be a lot of people that have their own talk on it. So everyone's got an opinion, which is fine. When it gets personal, that's a bit disappointing, because I'm only saying what my opinion is, and only sort of trying to back it up with law. Mm-hmm. I don't make the law, by the way. I implement the law, and we'll see. But hey, it's a way of life, and you have to be used to it. So I'm used to it.